My wife cheated on me for months. The revenge I took will make you think I'm a madman. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our two kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself. But since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. So, I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some shit was going on. Then one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF where they discussed how my wife was regularly fucking one of her ex-BFs from high school. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking shit about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times, dates, locations, all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch. Then they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other and the fallout absolutely fucked mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work. I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly, lots of fighting in out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. For me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kids' mom and is important to them, nothing beyond that. She was definitely angry, and don't get me wrong, I made her suffer throughout the divorce. For example, she wanted to try couples therapy and I agreed. Not because I thought there was a path to reconciliation, but because it felt good to lay out exactly how I felt about what she'd done. How disgusted, disappointed, and angry I was with her. She always left those appointments in tears and would sit bawling in her car for a while before pulling herself together. Eventually, she realized that it was already over for us and canceled the remaining appointments. I also had to think about what was best for the kids. I wasn't going to bring the chaos I experienced into their lives, where I saw my parents screaming at each other, my dad calling my mom a whore and worse, and vice versa. It was in their best interest to make things go smoothly. I've never told them the details of what happened between their mom and me, and I probably never will. I don't know what she's told them about it, but I still have Ron's report stashed away in case they need to see the truth. Also, I wasn't really angry with Bob for my own sake. I was angry with him on behalf of his wife. I felt like she deserved to at least know what was going on, and what she chose to do about it was up to her. Bob's consequences are due to his wife's and probably her dad's rage at what he'd done. I just lit the fuse. I don't know if she knew or found out what I'd done or the full extent of it, but I know that once Bob didn't have a high-paying job, lots of money, or a place to live, she dropped him like a hot rock. She also stopped her shenanigans after getting served to beg for forgiveness and to try to save our relationship. We'd had a lot of conversations about how my parents' infidelities had fucked up my family and how I felt cheating was unforgivable. She flipped out at work and called me about 100 times, alternating between being apologetic and enraged over having her served in front of her colleagues, and it got to a point where I had to block her number and report her to the police, which obviously I took back the complaint. In all of this, I hope none of this happens to all of you, and most importantly, make sure you choose the right person and prioritize your kids. It's been almost a decade since we split. I got married again about 3 years later, still happy together. My father cheated on my mom, but the actual truth broke me completely. Long story short, my father cheated on my mother with my stepmother. My wife, in our 7-year relationship for dating, 3 married, has never met my father, stepmother, half-siblings, step-uncles, or my step-grandfather. My mother convinced my wife she didn't want any of them at the wedding or have any holidays with them the entirety of our relationship. My wife was cheated on in the past but moved past that, or so I thought. Well, my wife and I recently found out we're having our first child, but my wife is not excited or happy at all because my mother told her that my father cheated on my mother once she got pregnant. Yes, accurate, but it was before either of my parents knew my mother was pregnant with me. My wife is convinced that I'll cheat on her because she's pregnant. Very unlikely, as she's the most amazing woman I've met and no one can hold a candle to her on looks. My mother just says I'm my father's son, which really pissing me off, but because my wife hasn't met my father, she says that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. She does trust me, she says she trusts me, but she cries every time my phone goes off. My stepmother, who I call Mama, says to not vilify my mother and be a supportive husband to my wife as I can be. She even bought me some stuff to pamper my wife with because she deserves to be loved and pampered like the beautiful woman she is, and how pregnancy is tough on women's bodies. I trusted the woman who was pregnant 3 times, once with twins, so, besides the obvious, how can I get my wife to calm down and enjoy her pregnancy? Or convince her that I will not cheat on her? I love my wife, she makes me whole, there will never be anyone but her. Edit. To add, my father and stepmother owned up to what they did to me years ago. They always apologize to my mother whenever they see her because she constantly brings to up. I'm almost 30, but my mother will not stop making jabs at my father about my stepmother. I'll see what I can do about that. Separate my wife and mother, currently looking for therapists, and going to break out a couple face masks so my wife will be in a good mood when I talk to her. Maybe give her a massage. But I need to talk to her and cut contact with my mom. Update 1. 1 month later. Okay, thank you to everyone who responded to my post. Me and my wife are grateful, and hopefully my head is firmly out of my ass. Firstly, my wife has joined an online book club with a lovely group of women who I have met. She's made friends, she's enjoying their book, the majority of them are moms, so they have plenty to talk about. With permission from my boss, I changed my work hours so we could spend more time together, and we've been talking a lot. She is much happier, and she's been talking to a therapist and me about her insecurities. It's a work in progress, but that is life, and our baby is developing very well due to reduced maternal stress. Secondly, I now call my stepmother by her first name. I don't call her Mama anymore. She wasn't upset at all. My wife has met my grandfather SM's dad and my uncles SM's brothers. They got along real well. Especially since I got a pie to the face and they all laughed at me. Fair. I'm under the impression it was my grandfather's idea, but as long as she is happy. Her laughter is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. My mother was told therapy or no contact. I was told she wasn't going because there wasn't a thing wrong with her. Her husband and daughters, my awesome sisters, are going to keep trying. My mother and wife have been out of contact since My wife is a little upset, but because of this she's made new friends that when the world is better she can meet in person and they can dish on their husbands out of earshot. Kidding. Then someone in my DMs got into my head about the paternity, about my half-siblings, if they really are my fathers or not. So I talked to my family about genealogy and learning about where our family came from. One of my uncles suggested we just make our own episode of Maury. Stepmother said it would be pretty boring, but whatever if that's what we want to spend our money and time on. Yes, my family is a little weird, so all us kids took tests. My sisters didn't want me to be left out. I mean, I had the test as a baby, no true surprises. 4 out of 5 kids matched, the one that didn't. Me, the one kid my dad was sure about, several tests, they all agree. My dad isn't my biological father. Dad's upset, I'm upset. I haven't told my wife because I don't know how to really say it without sounding like a crazy person. And I still have emotions about the results myself. Me and my twin half-siblings could be triplets. I don't understand. I'm a little lost here. I'm overwhelmed. If anyone has anything for me, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'd love to ask my mother about this fun revelation, but she's not getting anything from me until she goes to therapy. My stepfather and sisters wouldn't know anything about it. So if anyone has advice, I'm open to hearing it. I wasn't expecting to make a trilogy out of this. I was just expecting some advice to help me with my wife. But thank you to everyone who has been helpful. I shall continue my epic update to before I begin. My dad and I went through with a paternity test through a doctor, no change. And, well, I did a genealogy kit and made the results public so I could try to find my father that way, and suddenly nothing yet on that front. My wife has met my whole family. It's amazing, and she's talking about us renewing our vows so they could be there that time. Baby and virus permitting. I do like the idea. And my wife apologized to me about the hurtful things she said and the way she behaved. And even offered to have them paternity test our baby with a promise for the most boring paternity result ever. The baby being mine. I trust my wife, we're a team, and I love her. There will never be another person for me. I will take her up on her offer, but it's not because I think it will expose something, and I've told her just that. My stepfather reportedly gave my mother my paternity results. He told me she screamed that BTCH. I believe that is a reference to my stepmother. She claims my stepmother tampered with the results of all the tests us kids took to make my mother look bad because, and I quote, that skank couldn't close her legs for a cold breeze. She fuck everything that moves. Things were thrown, and a lot of other things were screamed about my dad and stepmother. She is indefinitely no contact with me or my wife. Her daughter, my half-sister, has been removed and is living with my stepfather's parents until her paternity results come back. My other sister is my stepsister, she's safe. And Mama, my loving stepmother, has busted the evil stepmother myth for my darling wife. Their relationship is relatively new, but those two, plus my 2 sisters' dad's girls, and my other 2 sisters have teased starting their own book club while they wait for baby to arrive. Or the world to right itself, whichever comes first, so I think I'm okay. It's not perfect, not a fairy tale, but maybe an update when my sister's results come in, or if I get a hit on my genes, or I can leave you all in suspense. I can stop using this account and bothering the poor people on this subreddit. But when my boy is born, it will be hard not to tell you all about it. I don't know how to link my past posts as I'm on mobile, so I do apologize. But if anyone has any true further advice to offer me, I will be thankful for anything. Update 3. Okay, so I wanted to start with the happy news, but I thought I should start with the title because I am, well, furious. My wife was with my dad's family because my mother tried breaking into our house. So my mother found out my wife was staying there and basically tried to do the same. When she broke into my house, I did call the police, but they let her go with a warning. Even after I tried to press charges, she's your mom, you don't want to do that to her. Mother busted in a living room window to be confronted by stepmother. Mother busted stepmother over the head with my grandmother's urn. Dad called the cops, but not before my grandpa punched my mother. Mother and grandpa were arrested and taken to the station before I got there. Dad and one of my brothers went with stepmother while my sisters were consoling my wife until I got there. I immediately took my wife to her mother's house and stayed there while my uncles freed grandpa, who was having a grand old time since it reminded him of his military days, and he loved his military days. My stepmother is recovering, but given she's not that young anymore, it may take her some time to fully recover. Dad and I are pressing charges on my mother. Every charge we can get because I'm done. Anyway, I found my biological father's family, a wife and 2 sons. I have 2 half-brothers who were very surprised I existed. My father passed suddenly 3 years ago, so all that I have is his wife and sons, and I apparently look just like him. I'll never truly know his side of the story, but I know that he married his wife when I was 4 years old, and his wife has no idea who my mother is. They're very nice people who can't wait for all of us to meet in person. My little sister's paternity results haven't come back yet, that I know of. She's very busy these days. My wife has assured me that her and the baby are okay. I am just unbelievably angry at my mother right now. So if anyone has anything they can give me, I'd appreciate it.